Hey folks, welcome to another video from SubQuery where we're going to take a look at starting how to create a wallet application powered by SubQuery. Now, the aim of this lesson is not to build a fully fledged wallet application, but a very simple example of how to index all the transfers of all accounts on the Substrate blockchain. This screenshot here is taken from subscan.io, and you can scan the QR code to navigate directly to this particular block, which is just under 14 million. And you can see here we've got a balance of 214 DOT that was transferred from the address 16LMR to the address 13YMK. Now, the actual end goal or end result is that we want to be able to write a GraphQL query on the left-hand side here and retrieve the same data from our indexing project to that of the Explorer itself. And here you can see the block number ending in 757. This matches. We've got the from address or the from ID, 16LMR, 16LMR, and then the to address or the receiving address, and they match as well. And of course the balance or the amount down below is 214 DOT. Now, what are the use cases? Well, here's an example of Fearless Wallet. They've created some code on GitHub, which is open source, in order to power their particular wallet, indexing data such as accumulated rewards, accumulated stakes, error stakes, etc. And in fact, if I go into explorer.subquery.network, I can dig into Fearless Wallet, and you can see down below we've also got a playground where you can actually run in real time the actual GraphQL query and see the data coming back. So here we've got this particular ID has accumulated 0 stakes, this ID here has some stake, etc. So this is an example of Fearless Wallet. Another example also in the Explorer is Nova Wallet, where they've gone ahead and indexed information. We'll jump into the Explorer again. Let's go back to the home page and scrolling down here, looking at community projects, you'll see Nova Wallet has created various applications for different parachains. For example, if we click into Bifrost, you'll see again a link to the open source code and some example API queries grabbing historical elements for extrinsics, asset transfers, rewards, and also the amount as well. And in a similar vein to before, you can view and test this particular code and see the output for various queries. So very helpful indeed. So the steps involved, you can see on screen here, the very first one is to run the subql init command, because you don't want to start from scratch. What this does is it builds a template or a scaffold of the project for you, pre-populated with files and folders that you modify. Speaking of modification, the first file is the schema.graphql file that defines the shape or the type of information you want to extract. The third step is to modify the manifest file, also known as the project.yaml file, and this is essentially a configuration file. The last step in the process is to modify the mapping handler file, and this is where the actual coding and transformation of the indexing data takes place. So with this in mind, let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we want to do is initialize our project, and we do this with the subql init command, and we give our project a name such as my account transfer. I can then go ahead and select my network family as substrate, and then scroll down and choose the Polkadot network. Let's choose the Polkadot starter project. And then we'll accept the defaults, and you should be able to see on the top left hand corner the actual project template created for us. So let's go ahead and jump into this folder, and I want to run yarn install just to download all the dependencies that this project requires, and this will then be placed into a folder called node modules. Okay, so that is done. The next step I'll do is I want to run yarn code gen. This is going to create the type scripts for my schema file, because what I actually want to do is run the starter project first, just to make sure that everything is running smoothly. So the next step will be to build the code, and then I can start the container because I already have Docker installed. And if I go to my package.json file here, you'll see I've got the Docker command, start Docker, which is really just short for Docker compose pull and Docker compose up. So I'll do that with yarn start Docker. And with Docker here, you can see I've already got it running, and the images are going to be pulled down. There you go, and you can see the 3 associated containers within spinning up, ready to get my project up and running. Okay, so now you can see it's starting to fetch blocks, and what I'll do is let's go ahead and pull up the playground, where you can see this is the default query here. If I run this, you'll see I've got results returned. So this is great news. It tells me that the project is running fine. So let's stop this. First of all, let's delete the database. Reason being is I want to start at a different block height. So to do this, you have to re-index and not have any existing information in the database. Next up, let's go into the schema file here. So what I want to do is define an account object. So let's delete this. And this is my account object. Effectively, it's a database table with a unique ID, a primary key. And I want to set this to the to address. Next up, I want to go ahead and define a second object here called transfers. And I want to record the amount, the block number, the to and the from account as well. And this is linked with the primary key of ID. So let's save this and let's go yarn code gen. Whoops. Like so. And that's done successfully. Next up, let's go to our manifest file here. Where scrolling down, you can see we're starting at the Genesis block. So it will take a long time if I start from way back at block 1. So let's start at block just under 14 million here for this particular example. And I want to delete the handle block because we won't be using that, and also the handle call. Now, the handle event is what we'll be using, and we'll be filtering on balances transfers instead of deposits. Just for this example, we could go ahead and extend this to include balance deposits and also balance withdrawals if we're creating a fully fledged wallet application. So now that I've got my project YAML file sorted, let's jump into the final file here, the mapping handler. Now, I'm not going to be using any handle blocks as you saw, so let's delete this. I don't have any call handlers, so we'll delete this as well. And I'll go ahead and delete the body of the handle event because I want to change this, customize it, and first of all, I want to highlight that in the balances.transfer event, the payload comes in the form of a from, to a value. So in order to extract the data from the blockchain, we have to go ahead and access the event.event.data method, because the event object here is of type substrate event, and you can go .event.data to access what you need. Next up, we want to go ahead and actually assign this toAddress, for example, to a new value. So I'm grabbing the string version of it and assigning it to the variable called toAccount. And I'm doing a check. So if it is valid, if I do have a value, then I want to save it to my account object or my account table in the database. Next up, I'll do the same here for the address, like so. I'm grabbing the from address, and if it's valid, I'll also save it to the database as well. The final part here is that we'll go ahead and instantiate a new transfers object, passing in as its constructor a unique ID made up of the block number dash event ID. And then in this new object, we're going to assign the block number, the to and the from ID, and the amount appropriately, as you can see here, to address and from address, etc. So that's all there is to it. So the next step is to go ahead and build this. But just a note that this will generate an error, because you'll see I'm trying to import starter entity, which doesn't exist. And this error should appear here. You can see starter entity. So let's delete this, and it should be account and also transfer. Also, I'll delete the two imports up above. I don't need these. Save it, and let's rebuild this. Okay, now that this is done, let's go ahead and start the Docker container again and kick this project into life. Okay, you can see sometimes it shows an error. That's due to my internet connection. So we'll just restart this again. And now you can see it's fetching blocks. So if I go back to my playground here and go to my transfers tab, this is the query you want to run. And I'll include this in the description in the workbook as well. But if I run this, I get no information yet because it's still indexing. Let's go. And there we have it. You can see some data coming back. And this is the 757 block number. You can see the from ID is 16LMR. The to address is 13YMK. And the amount is 214 DOT as required. So this is a very quick example here of how to spin up an indexing project on the Substrate blockchain, extracting the transfers of transactions. Let's go ahead now and do a quick summary, where the first step was running the SubQuery init command to create that starter project that we saw. Number 2 was modifying the schema.graphql file, where we actually created two entities called account and transfers. We then modified the manifest file, in particular the start block. We set it at just under 14 million, and then we had the filter for balances and the transfer method. And finally, in step 4, we modified the mapping handler, keeping the handle event function and modifying the code within to transform the indexing data. So there you have it. Hope it was useful, and I'll catch you on the next video.